Hello, Jimmo. I'm a very active viewer on your channel and I was telling my friend about it. He has a happy relationship and he wants to post it to help you fill your channel, if you're interested. His name is Carter, and he gave me the story to give to you. He hopes you like it. Hey y'all, my name's Carter. Let me tell you, it's hard living in the South, especially when you're a queer black guy in the closet that's just looking for love. I swear to you, I hated living down there because people treated me like an outcast just because I was 25, non-married, and didn't have any kids yet. Another reason I hated living there was that most guys here were jerks. I can tell you I spent many nights here trying to make a connection with someone just to have them fuck me and then ghost me soon after. Combine all this and my religious family, I pretty much disliked where my life was. I don't think things started to change until late spring when I attended my younger cousin's wedding. Like weddings go, there was a lot of downtime and waiting around before the bride made her entrance. Once again, I was isolated due to the fact that everyone there had a spouse and or children. I remember sitting there bored out of my mind while trying to stay awake when I felt someone sit next to me. I didn't pay attention at first because I thought it might have been one of my family members, but then I heard them talk to someone up ahead. I didn't recognize the voice. I turned to find this delicious looking Hispanic man sitting next to me. Now, I normally don't act thirsty around attractive men, but let me tell you, he was so damn fine. If I was a woman, let me tell you, I probably would have gotten pregnant right then and there. We didn't have much conversation, sadly, due to me losing my nerves, and before I knew it, it was time for the wedding reception. Once we got there, I pretty much drowned my sorrows in wine. At one point, on the urging of my brother, my male cousins sat around me and tried to get me to join the party. Even though I told them I wasn't interested, they stayed near me and began to have their usual overly masculine conversations that only black men can have. At one point, the conversations turns to the woman that they are fucking, or rather, have fucked in the past. I get annoyed as I already know where this question is going and immediately excused myself. From that moment, I decided that I was fed up with the evening and I wanted to go home. As I walk outside to catch an Uber, I'm shocked to see the same attractive man for the church was sitting on a bench while playing a game on his phone. I was nervous upon seeing him again, but I managed to gather the courage to sit down and talk to him. I learned that his name is Pablo. He's 36, a dental hygienist and a mutual friend of the groom. We hit it off really well, conversation-wise, and before I knew it, he invites me back to his place for a drink. We get to his apartment, and much to my surprise, he doesn't try to fuck or ghost me like most guys do. Instead, we ended up watching some Austin Powers movies, played some video games, and had a deep conversation about politics, money, and adulting in general. I gotta tell you, being ghosted by guys over the years sort of turned me into a cynical person. During the entire evening, while I did enjoy myself, I kept waiting for him to turn into a gigantic jerk. Much to my surprise, the evening went on as planned, and before I knew it, he was calling me a ride home. Before I left, however, he said he was happy to have met me and gave me one of the best kisses that I've ever had from a guy. I got back at 2 o'clock to find my parents waiting for me. Even though I'm an adult, they chew me out for skipping out on reception and demand to know where I was for all these hours. I ignore them and go straight to my room, reflecting about the night I spent with Pablo. I found myself unable to sleep and ended up texting him to see if they wanted to hang out, possibly on the weekend. He responded by saying that he had something important to do and that he needed his full attention, but I wanted to, I could tag along and keep him company. I didn't care whatever the important thing was, and immediately told him that I would keep him company with whatever he was doing. The next day, I came and I found myself sitting outside a restaurant that Pablo had agreed to meet at. I was so excited to spend time with him that not only got there an hour early, I also went all out with a new outfit, fresh kicks, and new jewelry. While I waited, I kept wondering what this task was that Pablo had to do that needed his full attention. I soon got my answer as he parked his car and reached into the back seat. My jaw dropped further than any cartoon character when I realized that he was helping a small child out of the back seat. Turns out that he didn't tell me everything about himself. He left out the part that he has a young son and is co-parenting with his ex. I can't tell you how much I was feeling in that moment. Here I was ready to make a love connection, and now I felt embarrassed that I had infringed on his day off with his son. I try to talk my way out of that so I can go home, but Pablo begs me to stay, promising that I'll definitely enjoy myself. I couldn't say no to this handsome face and ended up staying with them for the whole afternoon. I'm glad to say that I'm happy I spent the time with them. Any chance I tried to be shy and closed off to myself was dashed by his son, who was talkative and insisted on asking me a million questions, like kids do. I gotta admit, the kid was quick-witted and had me laughing at certain points. I also couldn't help but notice that Pablo was watching us the entire time, as if we did this on a normal basis. At one point after we finished lunch, Pablo took us to the video store and let his son go wild in the game section. I remember while his son was distracted, he came from behind me and hugged me. He apologizes for not telling me about his son, but says that he didn't want to scare me off earlier. He then admits that he really likes me and would like to see me more often. From that day on, we did see more of one another. Every waking moment that I was free, I texted Pablo to see how he was, and every time I was free from work, I always ended up at his apartment. I got to know his son pretty well, to a point where I ended up babysitting him a few times. To make things better, I even managed to get along with the kid's mother, who was more than happy to become my friend. While my dating life with Pablo was great, my at-home life was really sucky. Since I had started dating him, my parents, especially my father, had went into overtime trying to probe my life. Oftentimes they would grill me as if I was a criminal in order to find out who I was spending time with. Other times they would try to catch me off guard in order to take a look at my cell phone. I remember one time they even sent one of my relatives to try and spy on me. Anything to possibly uncover what I was hiding from them. They also upped the ante and decided to set me up with multiple girls, only to be disappointed when it didn't work out. After their 6th attempt to set me up with a girl failed, my parents decided to sit me down in order to talk with me. They once again demanded that I tell them about my personal life. To make matters worse, they also did a critique of my entire life and career, harping on the fact that because I had no kids or wasn't married that I was a failure. They also started saying things about how weak I was and I needed to act more manly and stop being a sissy about certain things. At one point, the conversation turned into a shouting match, and before I knew it, my siblings managed to get my parents to leave the house with them in order to cool off. Normally, when we argued about my life, I never let it bother me, but for some reason their words really hurt me this time, and I began to cry. I was so distraught over the argument that I texted Pablo, who came over right away. I couldn't hide my upset from him, and I just started wailing about how I hated my parents and the way they treated me. At one point, I made the comment that they don't love me. He then shocks me by saying, "Fuck them, you don't need them because I love you." I look back at him unsure of what to say. He then grabs my hand and gives it a tiny soft kiss before bringing me closer for a hug. He tells me not to cry and that I shouldn't let them bring me down to his level. His touch was so comforting, and hearing him say that he loved me really just made all the pain melt away. We were both so caught up in the moment that before I knew it, he was naked, pelting me with kisses and attempting to help me undo my clothes. Our precious moment was completely fucked over, however, when the door opened and my family came into the living room. My sister was the first one who got a glimpse of us, and he did her best to hold my parents back before they could come into the room. Pablo managed to get his pants on before my parents barged past my sis and into the room. My mom was speechless, and my father's face begins to contort into something not of this world. Soon he's yelling at us about how we're disgusting, and that he wants me out of the house. My father attempts to fight both me and Pablo, only to be held back by my brother and sister. I remember going out the back door so fast and just climbing into his car before we went back to his place. I had never been so embarrassed in all my life. To make matters worse, my parents knew for sure that I didn't like girls. I stayed away with him for 2 hours to give my parents some time to cool off. I knew I had to face them, but I was afraid to. Eventually, I get a call from my brother, who's telling me that he wants to visit me. He comes over to the apartment to check on me. We have a good laugh about the situation to ease the tension. After that, he tells me that my parents threw away all of my stuff and have completely disowned me. It's a hard revelation for me to swallow, but eventually I hold it all in and ask Pablo if I can stay with him, to which he agrees. The next few months were probably the rockiest part of our relationship, as my parents didn't make us being together easy. Every chance they got, they sent me hate emails, vulgar voice messages, threatening letters in the mail, vandalizing my car a bit, and even at one point, my dad tried to get Pablo fired from his job. Both my siblings also suffered as they were thrown out for associating with me. The constant hatred put a strain on me and Pablo's relationship. We spent many days separate from one another and had times where we wouldn't speak or touch each other for days. It got so bad that at one point we decided that we should break up altogether and go our separate ways. The breakup never happened because God, or I'd like to think it was God, intervened. We were driving back to the store one day and we got into a heated argument about my parents once again. Pablo and I were so caught up in the drama that we got hit by a car. I hadn't seen it coming, and before I knew it, the car was flipped over and I heard sirens coming. Honestly, shit like that I thought only happened in movies or bad police chases on TV, but it had happened to me. Miraculously though, we both survived with only a few scratches on us. When we got home from the hospital, we just embraced each other. Having that brush with death made me realize that my parents were destroying my relationship, and I needed to stop if I was going to survive. They had taken so much from me in my life, and now I was pissed off. I refused to let them take the person that I love so much. About 2 months later, I received a call from my Aunt Rita inviting me to a family function. She said that she had heard about what was going on with my life and wanted to talk to me about it. While I didn't want to possibly run into my parents or anyone else that would vex me, I was in really vindictive mood and wanted to get back at my parents for everything they had tried to do to me. Pablo was apprehensive at first, but I convinced him that everything would work out just fine. I even convinced him to bring his son to make it a full day. If you come from a black family, then you already know that family get-togethers are just an excuse for relatives to get together to gossip and throw shade at each other. When me and Pablo walked up in there, it didn't matter what they said about us. It only mattered that we were there together. We held hands, kissed a lot, and talked about our romantic life to anyone who would listen. It also made me happy that Pablo's son constantly talked about how much he loved me being with his dad. Majority of my relatives, especially my parents, gave me the side-eye, while others tried to adjust to me embracing my new life. It started to get late when my aunt came outside and said she wanted to finally talk to me. When I went inside her house, much to my surprise, she also invited my parents to join me. Having not had a single pleasant conversation with my parents, I tried to avoid eye contact with them as they sat across from me. Aunt Rita tells me that she threw this party for the sake of trying to quell things between me and my parents. I learned that my parents didn't want to come, but apparently my aunt had made them. Aunt Rita forces my parents to talk to me about my relationship with Pablo and all the nasty things they've done to me. My mom expresses that everything on her mind. She starts off by apologizing for all the nasty things she did and says she may be willing to give it a chance, as she still loves me. When it becomes my dad's turn, he refuses to say anything to me and tries to go for the door. Before he can get away, my aunt stops him. She starts to scream at him, telling him that he should tell me the real reason why he's against my love for Pablo. When I ask my aunt what she means by that, she spills the tea. Apparently, growing up, my dad had sexual relationships with several men before he met my mother, and when my grandfather found out about it, he was livid and physically beat my father until he agreed to give it up. I'm shocked by hearing this revelation and confront my dad about it. Immediately, he shuts down and starts to scream at me once again about how being gay and black is unmanly and that he would never accept me or Pablo. The conversation spirals out of control, and once again my dad loses control of his temper, which forces me and Pablo to leave again. Today, Pablo and I are happier than we've ever been in our entire lives. Without shame or interference, we plan to spend the rest of our lives together. I'm telling you guys, we have been discussing union plans for the longest, and we've even contemplating expanding our family a bit more. What also makes me happy is that his son started referring to me as Pops and likes to show me off to his friends every chance we get. My mom is slowly coming around. I know she's not comfortable with dealing with me, but she is trying. I did start to receive the usual threats and letters again from my dad, but at this point I just ignore him and went on with my life. My life was 1000% better than when it was before I met Pablo, and I gotta say I'm extremely glad that things are working out. He truly is the love of my life, and I hope he can always remain this way. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.